Okay, and here we go. Heck yeah, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. This is going to be an absolute blast. I'm really excited about this one. I put a lot of time and effort into making this to be a pretty freaking great stream for everybody. So basically what we're doing today is we're going to be diving through a whole bunch of junk. And one of the things that someone had mentioned to me was they didn't enjoy 40k or they didn't enjoy other war games simply because it wasn't like actually tactical. It wasn't tactical like real life kind of is tactical. And you know what? It really is. It's actually shocking. So what I did is I went through the Book of Five Rings, and I went through the actual Art of War book, and then I went through some of Dwight Eisenhower's writings, and I went through some of these things, and man, a lot of the tactical quotes you hear from military leaders throughout history apply brilliantly to the game of Warhammer 40k. And I'm sure you can make the same argument for a variety of other war games. And so what I did today is I took like a list of ones that I've really picked out, and I wanted to make sure that I was going to quote them to you, and I was going to kind of give you my thoughts on them on how exactly they apply to the game of 40k. Because when you understand some of the quotes from these great military minds in history, what I think you'll find is that your mastery of the game is going to increase dramatically, and you're going to see quite a nice little boost in your own gameplay, which honestly, gonna be pretty freaking sick. Like, I think you guys will really enjoy this one. So I'm just gonna make sure I post right here that we're live, and so I'll just copy that. Everyone, woo, 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 woo. We are live, and then we're basically just gonna get right into it. So I got one thing I need to do right before we get started. Just bear with me with it. I see you in the chat, Jurgen. Thanks so much for joining us. This is gonna be awesome. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the Cappy Corp Discord, and I just want to thank all of my freaking supporters, because when you guys, I know it's only $4 a month to you guys, but it is the world to me. It's the only reason why I'm actually able to put these videos out consistently. This is actually turning into kind of a career for me, which is really exciting. We're almost there. And I just wanted to say thanks so much for your support. I'm really glad you're getting value from the channel. And one of the things I do for the members in the Discord is I host these TTS tournaments where we get to really put our skills to the limit. And what happens is the next season 2 of Happy Corp and Wargaming, season 1 was actually 64 players. Season 2, we've already got over 50 people signed up, and it is going to launch on Tuesday. We're going to start on Tuesday. So list deadline and submission is going to be on Monday, which would be, I believe that's the 8th, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that's the 8th. And so if you sign up, all you got to do is you got to be a member, so you have access to the members side of the Discord. That way you can actually get to communicate and message people's. But it's a really great tournament. That's going to be a lot of learning for you, because you get to actually change your list every single week. Now you can't tailor your list, because you're going to have to submit your new list each week before you find out who your next opponent is. So you're not going to be able to like get advantages of like seeing who your opponent is first or anything. And you don't have to change your list every week, but it is a great way to be able to explore the meta really rapidly over the course of a 5-week TTS tournament. So hopefully we see a bunch of y'all in here. So I'm going to go ahead and get this thing going. Hey, Paul, what's up, man? Thanks so much for joining chat. Super excited to have you here. So basically, one of the real things is that happens when you're exploring tactics and strategy games is you have to understand that there's a big difference between the idea of tactics and the idea of strategy. And what are those differences, you ask? Well, tactics is always going to be what to do. And tactics are things that you can, once you learn the rules of the game, you can start to master your tactics. Well, this is my movement phase. I moved 6 inches. I have a reactive move. So if you're moving within 6 inches of me, I get to move. So these are the things that you do. But then you have strategy, which is a much higher skill level, and it takes you into when and why to do it. And these are the things that a lot of the generals from military history have actually really mastered. They mastered the art of strategy. So we had to ask ourselves the question, do real world tactics apply to a game? And the answer is absolutely yes. And how do we apply it? Well, we're going to be going through quotes today. We've got a bunch of them in here. We've got Sun Tzu from The Art of War. We've got Mamato Musashi, who wrote the Book of Five Rings. I'm going to butcher some of these names, guys. Just bear with me on it. USI Kenshin. I know a lot of people are going to hate me on that one, but some of these are just actually fantastic strategists and generals. And when you read these books, which I recommend everyone read these books, it actually has a lot of great life advice too, as well. So let's start today. I'm going to start first off on USI Kenshin. Once again, I completely butchered the name, and it is what it is. So when I'm reading a lot of his main quote, and this is the one that is really credited to him. What it means to me is it means that he's teaching the value of actual commitment. So the quote is, engage in combat, fully determined to die, and you will be alive. Wish to survive in the battle, and you will surely meet death. There's several variations of this quote. I'm not entirely sure which one is actually the words that he said, but some of them will say, he who goes into combat determined to die shall surely live, and he who goes into combat determined to live surely shall die. There's a little variations on it, but that is the quote, and that is him. And we do credit him with it. Now, what does this really mean? Well, what I take away from when I read this quote and how I apply it to tactics and strategy in 40k is I talk about undercommitment and overcommitment. One of the things that happens all the freaking time is that we might be trying to go for a specific goal. Maybe I'm trying to make sure I kill a unit. So I put Oath of the Moment on it, and I put all of my Eradicators into it, and I put all of my whatevers into it. And I'm like, you know what? It's just one Rhino that I have to kill. Do I really have to put all 6 of my Eradicators into it? Or should I split fire, put some of my Eradicators over here? Well, the question is, do you need to kill that Rhino? If you have to kill that Rhino, then you have to make sure you kill that Rhino. And so this is what I really get out of this quote is you need to actually commit to doing what you need to do. And it can be a fine line between overcommitting and undercommitting. But essentially, once you find that balance of like exactly how much you have to commit to really killing things, you make sure that you're no longer at the mercy of dice. If I have 6 Eradicators with an Apothecary Biologus who has Fire Discipline, so suddenly I'm getting critical hits that are sustained and lethals on 5s, right, out of this Eradicator unit. I know that if I'm shooting into an Oath of the Moment target that is a Rhino, I will kill that Rhino. The statistical anomaly that would actually have to happen to not kill the Rhino at that standpoint is so absurd, you could never make any plan on actually not killing that Rhino. So you know for a fact that you will kill that Rhino if you put everything into it. However, if you split fire, the statistical anomaly becomes much, much greater. So what happens is I go knowing that I need to kill this Rhino. I'm going to dedicate that entire unit to killing that Rhino, as long as my game plan hinges upon killing the Rhino. So this is undercommitment and overcommitment all over the place. Another thing that this brings me up to is a lot of people, when they play this game, sometimes they're too afraid of actually losing models. And this really bewilders me. Hey, Rotten Miniatures, what's up, buddy? He's looking forward to learning how not to suck. That's hilarious. So one of the things that really gets to me in this game is sometimes people are just too afraid to lose their models. So what I do is I study Kenshin-kun's quote here. And I am known as an aggressive player. But I got to be honest with you. I think there's some people who need to be a little more aggressive. Your models are going to die in this game. It's going to be impossible to not lose units. If you are too afraid to lose units, what's going to end up happening is you're going to be so passive that you're never going to be able to commit, and you're just never going to be able to get anywhere in the game because you're too afraid to commit. So you cannot be afraid to commit. You have to be willing to lose models. You have to be willing to trade, even in armies that aren't good at trading. So when I play Custodes, for example, Custodes suck at trading, but I am still willing to lose a unit of my Custodes in order to get my game plan to achievement. So basically what I get out of this quote, and I hope you guys get out of it, is that you cannot be afraid to lose your models. When you put your models out there in an area where you know that they can be shot, you've already accepted the fact that they can die, that they can be lost. Don't sink resources into resurrecting something that you're comfortable losing. Go for it, and don't you just can't too worry about things. Once you have a game plan set, just follow your game plan. All right, cool. So that's essentially just how all your pressure lists work. Whether it's going to be your orcs, whether it's going to be your blood angels, whether it's going to be your custodes, whether it's going to be your world eaters, you have to be willing to accept certain losses so that the rest of your forces can get out. And that was USI Kenshin. Now I'm not necessarily going to go through every single quote in this exact level of depth, but a lot of them I will. So just feel free to, if you have questions or anything about it, go ahead and type it on down. I do appreciate super chats, but they're certainly not required. And we'll move on into the next one. Mamato Musashi, improving at the game. So the important thing in strategy is to suppress the enemy's useful actions, but allow his useless actions. What the heck does this mean? So when I'm reading this quote, I'm going through my head, what does that actually mean to me? Well, for me, something that I talk about, if you watch some of my live streams where I'm playing and I'm teaching, one of the things I always like to harp on is I try to force my enemy into a position where he has no option but to make a bad decision. Whether that he's going to move his unit into my Overwatch or he's going to have to charge a unit that's going to fight first, I try to do everything in my power to guarantee that my opponent must make a crappy decision. And it's up to them to choose which crappy decision they're going to make. But I want to force it. I don't want the dice to influence my game. So what I do is I put myself in certain positions that requires my opponents to have to rely on dice to get bailed out, right? So let's say I have my, maybe I should have had TTS pulled up for that. Maybe I should pull up TTS so I can set some of these scenarios up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do another, maybe not a live stream, but I'll film this video as a recording as well. And I'm going to have some TTS in the background to kind of demonstrate some things as well. But essentially, I'm going to have a super bad Overwatch setup. And then I'm also going to have a fight first brick that's hanging out on or a fight on death brick that's hanging out on an objective. So if you want to charge from behind cover, I'm going to fight first, or I'm going to fight on death. If you want to come out into cover, or if you want to come out into line of sight first, I'm going to Overwatch you. I'm going to deplete your forces. So I put you in situations where you must make bad decisions. This is actually how I play my Blood Angels into Thousand Suns. So what I do is I know the biggest threat to me when my opponent is playing Thousand Suns is that he's going to get his exalted sorcerers on disc into a position where he gets to slow me down turn 1. So what do? Well, I set up my Ball Predator and I set up my Gladiator Reaper or whatever into positions that if he wants to move his exalted sorcerer, then I'm going to Overwatch and kill it. So then he gets screwed because he's not going to be able to slow me down without losing his model. So he's forced to make a bad decision. Do I go ahead and give up my character turn 1 to slow him down? Or do I not slow him down and give him the ability to get to wherever he needs to? It's really, really frustrating. So you put your opponent into positions where they are screwed. Let's read this other quote I have on here. It is not difficult to wield a sword in one hand. The way to learn this is to train with 2 long swords, 1 in each hand. It will seem difficult at first, but everything is difficult at first. This is another just beautiful thing. A lot of the times when I'm talking about when I'm teaching strategies, say I'm doing a coaching session and I'm teaching people how to set up their pile-in and consolidations. And I'm like, hey, listen, you want to make sure that you make your charge, but you want to make sure that a different enemy is going to be within your pile-in range so that they can't, say, activate a fights first. And like, oh, it's so hard to set up these positioning. Well, you're not wrong. It is kind of hard to set up a bunch of these positions, but the only way you're going to get to do it is to practice. And a great place to practice, shameless self-promotion, is going to be in the Happy Crumpin' TTS tournament, which is starting on Monday. So if you're not a member of the Discord right now, you can sign up by becoming a YouTube member or a Ko-Fi member in the links down below, and then join the members-only Discord. Get your list submitted on BCP. The link is all in the Discord as well, and then you can practice as well. Let's move on into the next here quotes. This is from Sun Tzu. If you don't know who Sun Tzu is, my friends, you need to just buy the book, The Art of War. Now, there's another 40k channel called The Art of War, and those guys are great, but that's not what I'm talking about right now. I am talking about the actual book, The Art of War, written by Sun Tzu. I think everyone should read it. So you need to be capitalizing on your opponents. In the midst of chaos, there is also opportunity. Well, sometimes crap happens in this game. I have a unit of Exalted 8-bound that are charging a unit of guardsmen. And you know what? Magically, the guardsmen survive. That stuff happens in 40k. And you might be saying, oh, you get screwed by dice, blah, 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 blah. You might have gotten screwed by dice. But you know what? We play a dice game, and sometimes things happen. So what you have to do is you have to have a backup plan. And you have to have a backup plan for what happens if you don't kill those guardsmen with your Exalted 8-bound, which 100% should. And if you don't, you're going to create opportunity for your opponents to really screw you on that, right? So a lot of times these games might seem helpless. Let's say that you're playing an infantry list into Black Templars Gladius or Black Templars Ironstorm, and you're like, oh, they're just going to ruin my infantry. Well, you know what? Sometimes they don't. At my most recent tournament, I played in GothCon. I had a beautiful example of this. I was playing with my Blood Angels, and I was playing into Grey Knights. And the Grey Knights, it was on Purge the Foe. And if you guys know about Purge the Foe is a pretty awesome mission. I'm actually a really big fan of it. Where each round, the opponent for every kill, if you get a kill, you get 4 points on primary. If you get more kills than your opponent, you get an extra 4 points on primary. So you can get 8 points on that. So basically, you never want to go first on that mission. Because if you go first, you're probably not going to have lines to shoot your opponent, and you're probably not going to kill anything, and then your opponent is going to generally get much more easy lines on you, and all they have to do is kill one unit to get 8 points of primary in turn 1, which is kind of crazy. Then, you also never want to go first against Grey Knights, because if you do, they get to teleport turn 1, which is horrible. So I was playing against Grey Knights in turn 1, or I'm sorry, on the Purge the Foe, and I went first. You never want to go first on Purge the Foe, you never want to go first into Grey Knights. I adapt both. And essentially at that point in time, the game was essentially over, because when that happened, he basically had already won. So what I had to do is I had to create chaos, because if I just stuck to a normal game plan, it would just be a slow burn and I would lose the game. So now I have an opportunity to either stick to the game plan and lose, or I can create chaos. I chose the path of chaos. So what I did is I just took all of my troops and I just shoved them up the battlefield. And I spread out and I made it so that it was going to be impossible for him to deep strike anywhere, really, or within reason, because he could still always do a 3-inch deep strike. But I basically screened the entire board off of him and I really limited his mobility. So guess what? I 100% gave him like 2 or 3 kills in turn 1, which definitely gave him max primary. But that gave me the opportunity to get way more charges and way more access than I was going to otherwise. Now, it still wasn't a great plan, because me being out in the open was kind of hoping that he was going to whiff. But at that scenario, he was already going to win anyway, because I had gone first on Purge against Grey Knights. So I took myself from a unwinnable game plan to a bad game plan, but that was actually winnable. Well, guess what? I survived and I ended up winning the game. And I would have 100% lost it had I not changed my game plan. So in the midst of chaos, there's opportunity. So what I did is I caused chaos to create opportunity, and it worked brilliantly. It took me to 3rd in that tournament. The opportunity of defeating the enemy is provided by the enemy himself. 100% true for 40k. The general way that I win this game is I see my opponent move themselves into a place that will allow me to get a good charge and get a good pylon and consolidation that will allow me to tag a tank, etc. They actually created that opportunity for me to get the 3-inch consolidation that lets me capture an enemy outpost. It's their movements that I use to dictate my game plan. So the opportunity of defeating the enemy is provided by the enemy himself is 100% true. If your opponent is a turtle and they just want to stand just in their deployment zone, make sure that you can never shoot them. No problem. Then you 100% grab board control. They created the opportunity for you to win. In this game, you see what your opponent gives you and you take it. Your opponent will always give you something. It's impossible for them not to give you something. And then victory comes from finding opportunities and problems. Also 100% true. This is a great example. Let me elaborate on this one, because this might confuse some people. So what is a problem, say, when we're playing Imperial Guard? This is a really common one that screws people up. They're going to have a big old tank gun line. They're going to have 3 mana cores and 2 basilisk and Medusa carriage batteries, and all they have to do is sit in their deployment zone, and they're just going to hammer you and kill you. Okay, that's a huge issue, and honestly, there's not much in the game that can survive that, and it's a really, really big problem. So how do we handle that? Victory comes from finding opportunities and problem. What's the problem? The problem is I'm gonna die. He can shoot me. It doesn't matter what I do. I'm gonna get hit, and I'm gonna take damage. Okay, so what's the opportunity? Well, the opportunity is that he pays a cost for being able to do that, and one of the costs that he pays is pressure. And he pays a cost in the ability to hold objectives. So if I know that no matter where I stand, no matter what I do, I'm going to get pounded, I'm going to get killed, why don't I just completely pressure, send my stuff completely forward, box him into his deployment zone, so that even if he does end up tabling me, say, in turn 3, he can't leave his deployment zone until turn 3 or 4, which means he can never score primary, which means even if he tables me in turn 3, I still win. So I find the opportunity in the problem that has been presented to me. So that was a beautiful quote from Sun Tzu, 100% applicable to the game of Warhammer 40,000. We're going to stick with Sun Tzu for a little bit longer, then we're going to hop onto some other guys. The battle cannot be won, do not fight it. What does this mean for 40k? Can anybody guess? I want someone to type this in the chat. Type down in the chat for me. If the battle cannot be won, do not fight it. What does that mean to you? I'm going to go to the next one. I'm going to come back after I see some of the things that you guys typed in, because this is actually a really, really valuable lesson, and I really want to hear what you guys think. So I'm just going to skip that one, and I'm going to come right back to it. If you are strong, you must appear weak. But if you are weak, appear strong. That sounds like a bunch of gobbledygook nonsense. It's absolutely not. When I'm playing Blood Angels, what I do is I take just enough shooting. I have a Gladiator Reaper. I have a Ball Predator with a Ball Storm Cannon, which is like a really good Overwatch thing. And then I've got a Vindicator, which is good for popping transports. I do not have strong shooting, but I have just enough shooting to make my opponent have to play as if I had strong shooting. When I'm playing Orcs, I have a unit of Flash Kits. And don't get me wrong, that one unit of Flash Kits is pretty decent shooting, but does that mean my army has good shooting? No. But it's just enough to make my opponent play against me as if I'm a shooting army. And by doing that, I appear strong in the shooting phase, or I appear strong in the Overwatch phase, even though I'm actually not. And it forces your opponent to respect you in ways that if they really kind of knew your army, they might not really respect you. So, if you're strong, appear weak. If you're weak, appear strong. What about the other side? So that's the if you're weak, appear strong. But what about the other side when we're saying if you're strong, appear weak? Well, my opponent wants to charge a bunch of, I don't know, assault intercessors. Cool, I'm going to charge into you because it's just assault intercessors. They don't do anything. Aha, but I fight undeath, and I have CP to make myself lethal. So suddenly the damage that they were expecting is way higher than what they actually, is way less than the damage they actually receive, right? So you can set these things up all the time where you make your opponent think you're strong or you make them think that you're weak, and then you just completely dramatically change. The greatest victory is that which requires no battle. This kind of goes forth to what we were talking about earlier, where what I do is I set myself up in a position where my opponent has, the dice do not matter. Wherever my opponent moves, he gets screwed, where the dice just don't matter. One of the best things you can do to create this scenario is move blocking. I had an entire series where I taught move blocking back in 9th. I really need to update it for 10th edition. And I'm going to. It just takes quite a bit of effort, but I'm going to get that one. But when you get someone move blocked, you don't fight, but suddenly they can't move and they have to waste an entire turn. I do that with scouts all the time. I'll put scouts right on the line, and my opponent has to waste an entire turn literally just killing 10 scouts. So his entire army is used to kill 130 points of my army, and what do I care? Because then he doesn't even get out of his deployment zone. He's not scoring any secondaries. He's not scoring any primary. So what happens is I didn't even fight a battle, and I really screwed him for an entire turn, which can just be the entire game. That's the exact same thing. So let's go. I'm just going to look at the chat here for just a second. So I said, if the battle cannot be won, do not fight it. We have, I'm going to butcher that. Egit in España, which I think is, it's probably your first name in Espanol. He says, pick your targets. That's good. When facing Shuttle, just go watch other people play. Inga. So if you guys don't know, Shuttle is my admin, and he's a very good player. So yeah. So if the battle cannot be won, do not fight it. Inga says, when facing Shuttle, just go watch other people play. But yeah, so if the battle cannot be won, do not fight it. So let's take this. If you're about to fight a unit that you just can't win against, let's say that you are going to have to, he's got a big brick of Deathwing Knights with -1 damage, and there's literally nothing you can do to kill. Or, even better, you have Valerian hanging out with some Wardens. They're going to be -1 to hit, -1 to wound, -1 damage, 4-up Feel No Pain, 2-up armor, and a 4-up invuln. And you know for a fact that you just can't handle it. What's the best way to handle it? Don't handle it. just don't. It is a perfectly valid strategy. Just look at your opponent in the eye and be like, you know what? Fine. That's your objective. I'm going to go somewhere else. If you're playing Orcs and he has Mozrog, and Mozrog is hanging out on this objective, and you're like, dude, I cannot kill Mozrog, then don't bother. Don't waste any shooting into him because you're not going to kill him anyway. Just go everywhere else. Dominate everywhere else. That's what it means to me when you look at it and it says, if the battle cannot be won, do not fight it. Cool. So I'm going to move on. Let's look at some game plan stuff here. The height of strategy is to attack your opponent's strategy. Cool. So this is a beautiful, beautiful statement here. This is about screwing up your opponent's game plan or creating your own game plan. Well, let's say I'm playing someone and I'm playing, I don't know, Eldar. Okay. Yeah, we're playing Eldar. And I know my opponent has chosen behind enemy lines and deploy teleport homers. Well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to screen my freaking backfield so he cannot get behind enemy lines and he cannot do deploy teleport homers. Now, Eldar in particular have a way to kind of pass this because one of the things that they can do is they get to move in their shooting phase. But then what happens is they're forced to use all of their CP to do that using their fire and fade strat. So what I do is I still string myself out where if he really wants to get deployed teleport homers in my deployment zone for 4 victory points instead of 3 in the center of the battlefield, no problem. You're still not going to get behind enemy lines because I'm going to have my models aligned in such a way where you cannot land wholly within my deployment zone with your movement. And so at that point in time, my opponent's scoring nothing on behind enemy lines until like maybe round 4. So maximum he's going to get, maximum he's going to get 8, but he's probably going to get less than that. Or I can do it in such a position where he's going to be just kind of guaranteed to only get his 3 on deploy teleport homers because he's always have to just go to the center. So I attack my opponent's strategy. I know his strategy. He's told me it at the beginning of the game. I know it. Or if I'm playing orcs a lot of times, I'll see people and they'll take bring it down because I've got 3 trucks and 2 battle wagons or something. Okay, cool. Let me attack your strategy. I'm going to let all of my troops out, turn 1 behind cover, and I'm going to run my trucks backwards. Congratulations, you're going to score like 4 points and bring it down. So you really screw their strategy up by attacking their strategy. And that's so I just love that quote. I think it's really, really valuable. Victorious warriors win first and then go to war, while defeated warriors go to war first and then seek to win. This seems like an annoying statement to me, but in all reality, guys, if you read this again, what does it mean? Well, if you're ever getting coaching from me or anything, and we're doing like a game review where we're reviewing how we played or we're preparing for a matchup, one of the things I'm always going to ask you is I am going to ask you, okay, cool, how do you win this game? And the answer is always the same. I score more victory points than my opponent. Okay, that's a great place to start. Then that's a way to be a victorious warrior because you understand how you win. You score more victory points than your opponent. Then you ask the question, how do you score more victory points than your opponent? Well, if you're playing into an army like, say, World Eaters, which everything they're going to touch in melee is just going to die. Well, it's probably a bad choice to just charge them in melee. It's probably not the best option. So what you do is you're going to be moving into more of a move, block, and denial game plan. And by doing so, you're going to deny them the ability to actually score on you. So you're going to do things like, instead of touching an objective, you're going to move your models in front of objective so that he can't score overwhelming force when he kills your models. You're going to not touch the objective that you know he's going for so that he can't get storm hostile enemy or storm hostile objective. You're going to start denying him his primaries and his secondaries. This is how I beat Custodes when I'm playing my orcs. I know how to play my Custodes. I know how to play against Custodes. So if I'm playing against Custodes and he's got Valerian hanging out on objective and I know that I can't kill them, no problem. I don't need to kill him. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to disembark 10 Gretchen on the objective and take it from him. I'm going to use my 40-point unit to stand on a circle and say, get wrecked, nerd. Your 400-point brick can do nothing against the power of my 40-point unit. I'm not going to try to kill him because that's a bad way of winning because you're not going to win that game. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the Gretchen on the objective. So what happens here is your victorious warriors win first. So basically what I've done is I've already won the game in my head because I have the game plan. And I'm not trying to figure something out. Sometimes, like we talked about in the previous example with my Blood Angels versus the Grey Knights, you have to create chaos. Because, remember what Sun Tzu said earlier, chaos creates opportunity. But other times, you don't have to create chaos. All you have to do is have the correct game plan. Nice. In contest of strategy, you always want to lead the enemy about, rather than be led about the enemy. What does this mean? That means pacing, gentlemen. Or ladies and gents, because I actually, believe it or not, have 2 girls who are subscribers to me. So there could be a lady out here. I might actually have 3. I'm not entirely positive. In contest of strategy, you always want to lead the enemy about rather than be led about by the enemy. This means pacing. I want to determine the pace of the battle. I want to grab the battlefield and force my opponent into positions. I never want to be forced into positions myself. That's basically what we're talking about all evening right now. I want to force my opponent to make decisions. I never want my opponent to be forcing me to make decisions. If I am saying, if I'm playing Custodes, for example, and I'm playing into Eldar, this is a great example here. I always take an Eversword whenever I play Custodes. And if I'm playing Eldar, for example, they're going to take, 2 or 3 D cannons. Well, D cannons have a 24-inch range, and most of our deployments are going to be roughly 24 inches. Well, when I put an Eversword directly on the line who has a 9-inch scout move and a 9-inch move, suddenly my opponent cannot put D cannons on the line. He's going to have to actually put the D cannons like 3 to 4 to 5 inches backwards. Otherwise, he's risking me going first, sending my Eversor forward, and just slaughtering his D-cannon, and then he loses it. And then he's like, crap, what do I do now? So what that does is it really forces your opponent to react to your game plan. So you set the tempo, so he's going to have to deploy his D-cannons behind the line. You can do this with other scouting or infiltrator units as well, by the way. And when you do that, if they go first, they can't shoot you turn 1 because the range is only 24 and they only move 3 inches. So what happens is I've set the tempo. I have determined where my opponent is allowed to deploy his units. If I'm playing my Blood Angels and I have a Vindicator, well, I'm going to put it, sometimes I actually put it completely exposed. I don't even care if it's exposed, right? I kind of put it in the line fairly exposed. I give it just a little bit so it's going to have cover. So my opponent knows that if I go second, I'm going to have a 2-up armor save unit in cover with AOC, which is going to be pretty hard to kill. Not impossible, certainly, but it's going to be pretty hard to kill. But if I go first, I'm going to have a unit that's going to oath of the moment his nasty tank that he wants to put in a particular position, so he can't put it in that position. Because I'm willing to lose my model, and I've determined that if you place your model there and you go second, you lose it. And my opponent is almost never willing to sacrifice a model that way. So I can actually set the pace. Now, I'm not saying that that is the exact example that you always need to follow, but this is the type of thing that you can do to set the tempo. And this is a thing that I do. Now, I'm also an aggressive player. I'm willing to set the tempo that way. That doesn't necessarily work for every single individual person. But yeah, Blood Angels Invictors. Dude, you know what? That's actually an interesting concept. I actually have not messed around with Invictors in Blood Angels. I had not considered that at all until you just said it. But now that you mention it, +2 strength and a +1 attack on those things on a charge is kind of interesting. I'm going to have to give that some thought. Thanks for bringing it up, man. Okay. Yeah, there we go. So we've talked about all that. Let's move on to the next one. Victory points and winning. The greatest victory is that with which requires no battle. We've basically spoken about this one already. Essentially, what happens is, can you score enough points without ever even having to fight? Well, a lot of times you can, especially if you have a lot of, say, infiltrators. One thing that you can do is you can just move block the crap out of your enemy. You take cleanse, you take deploy Talbot Homers, you score all your victory points, your opponent never leaves their deployment zone, guess what? You win. This is how AdMech win, people. A lot of people think AdMech is a really bad army, and they're almost all incorrect about it. AdMech is actually not a bad army at all. AdMech is an army that people play incorrectly. If I take AdMech and I have my Sulfur Hounds and I have my Flappy Nerds, I know for a fact that I can move those things 21 inches turn 1. I can have a unit of Skitarii Rangers that get infiltrate, and then I can also redeploy. They also get scout with their infiltrate. I can use that to completely lock an opponent into the deployment zone turn 1. I can do it in turn 2 with the Sulfur Hounds, or turn 3 with the Flappy Boys. I can lock you for 3 rounds, 100% in your deployment zone if I go first. If I go second, I can lock you behind the midfield line. Isn't that kind of wild? If you play that way, it doesn't matter if you kill anything ever. They're just never going to leave their deployment zone until turn 3. They can't win. They just cannot get the points on it. So the greatest victory is that which requires no battle. Is 100% freaking true. To know your enemy, you must become your enemy. So this is one that I actually played with my really good buddy Sandra. So Sandra is the guy who actually got me into competitive 40k. If you guys ever get to hang out with him, he's an amazing human being. He's got the worst case of resting bitch face I've ever seen in my entire life, but he is a glorious human being, and he is a kind-hearted soul. He'll hate everyone for he will hate me for forever for telling people his secrets. But anyway, one of the things that I was doing when I was first playing is I was trying, in 9th edition, I was trying to win with my Custodes into his Chaos Knights, and I couldn't. So something that he offered up, a little suggestion he offered up, was brilliant. He had me play Chaos Knights, and he had him play the Custodes. So suddenly, I learned what he could actually do as Chaos Knights. And then I was able to beat Chaos Knights after that. So a lot of times, one of the big issues where you're like, oh, it's an impossible matchup, is you can't win it. It's not true. You just don't understand your enemy that well. So what I recommend a lot of times for people, when you're in a matchup that you're really, really struggling with, get your buddy to play your army, and then you play the army that's beating the crap out of you. You're going to learn the way the army works. I have a super high success rate beating Custodes. Guess what? Custodes is about my main army. But I smash Custodes when I play Orcs, and I smash Custodes when I play Blood Angels. Because I know Custodes, and I know what their capabilities are. I know their game plan. So I recommend this to you guys as well. If you're struggling with an army, play the unit that Play the army that you're struggling with. Learn him. We got Mr. Ian in the chat. To know your enemy, you must become your enemy. I hear no more slander when I play loads of armies and keep asking about it. Bro, pick an army. I love you, buddy, but pick an army already. Okay. Opportunities increase as they are taken. This is just so true. Occasionally, you know what? I have to leave a unit out to die, because when I leave that unit out to die, my opponent's going to have to move into position to kill him. I do this with orcs all the time, people. I take Mazrog, and a lot of times I very intentionally leave an opening where my opponent can shoot Mazrog. But what I do with that opening is really important. I force my opponent to move themselves into a shitty position in order to be able to shoot Mazrog. So I give them Mazrog, but I also force them to put themselves in a dangerous spot if they're gonna take them. And when that happens, I force him to give me opportunities. And it is a beautiful strategy, which, once again, it's one of the reasons why I advocate for a fairly aggressive playstyle, and I do think that is the better playstyle in the game. You have to be willing to take those little risks, but they're always very calculated risk, right? So Mazrog, he's a beautiful example of how you give the opponent the option to take a really bad choice. You just hang him out there just slightly, and so he gets to move into position, and then suddenly you have a beast boss running out of nowhere who gets a dev wound, deal like 1,000,000 dev wounds into a monolith or whatever, and just slaughter. So, yeah, it's beautiful. And then from the Eternal Iron Mike Tyson, who I really hope beats the shit out of Jake Paul in a few months. Hopefully that's going to be a real fight. I actually think it's going to be a real fight because I've got a tremendous amount of my respect for Mike Tyson, who that guy doesn't play. But everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. It's kind of a funny quote, but man, is it true. So I fought mixed martial arts for many years. I was a professional Muay Thai fighter for a while. I did a lot of stuff. And you know what? Your fight plan changes when you get punched in the mouth. Well, it's no different here in Warhammer 40,000, okay? In the game of Warhammer 40,000, you can have a brilliant game plan, and then something goes wrong because your opponent does something you weren't ready for them to do. And you're like, uh-oh. So sometimes this is just brilliant. If someone has a meticulous game plan and they're doing all these crazy things, sometimes you just go freaking call their bluff and you slap them in it. I play Eldar players a lot of times, and they'll have like 1,000,000 lines drawn on TTS, or they'll spend 30 minutes on their movement phase in real life. And I'm like, okay, cool. And then I just move my 12 inches and I go a charge and I 6-inch consolidate into 7 units and I say, get wrecked, nerd. And he's like, well, crap. It's why Kareen is such an amazing strategy for the orcs, because your opponent sets up all his super game plans, and then he kills it up, your truck blows up, you spend a CP to get to move its 12 inches, and then it blows up, and your opponent goes, well, now I'm boned, because you punched their plan in the mouth. I got a few more rapid-fire ones I want to go through here, and these will go pretty quick here, and then we'll start wrapping up for the evening. So David Hackworth, if you find yourself in a fair fight, you didn't plan your mission properly. I completely agree with this. The Otis is always on you to stage for your opponent. Do not let your opponent set the pace of the battle. You set the pace of the battle. You force your opponent into making bad mistakes. That is on you. People get too interested in dice. Let me tell you a quick story about this, okay? So I'm playing a game in Tactical Tortoise, so Trevi's League. If you guys know Trevi on Tactical Tortoise, go give them a like and subscribe. They do good work over there. And I'm playing a game in their league. And since I was playing, there were a significant amount of people watching. It was kind of humbling, and it was cool to have a bunch of people hanging out. And I made a big mistake. But people didn't think I made a mistake. People think I got screwed by dice, but I didn't get screwed by dice. I lost this game because I made a big mistake. Let me tell you how this went down. So I'm playing, it's like round 2. I'm in the WA. I've got 2 units of knobs, 2 10-man units of knobs, and I have a big unit of snaggas led by a beast boss. And he has a unit of aggressors and a repulsor executioner. Well, both of my units of knobs have a 3-inch charge into this unit of aggressors. So in my brain, I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to make the charge. I kill them. Basically, I win the game because he's got nothing that can clean me up afterwards. And then my snaggas had a 6-inch charge on the repulsor executioner. So I'm going to tell you what happened, and then I'm going to tell you what my mistake was. But I think some of you guys might already be able to pick out what my mistake was because you're savvy players. So what I did is I rolled a charge on my beast snaggas. It was a 6-inch charge, and I rolled a 4. And I went, well, damn. So what I did is I spent a CP to re-roll that, and I rolled an 8. So my snag is winning, and they annihilated this repulsor. I think the beast boss by himself did like something ridiculous, like 16 dev wins. It was nonsense. So they annihilated it. But then what happened is I rolled my charge for my first unit of knobs. Remember, it was a 3-inch charge. I rolled a 2. And I've already used my CP reroll. No big deal. I had a second one. This is why I didn't care, because I knew I was going to make the next one. This second unit also had a 3-inch charge into the aggressors. Rolled a 2. Did I get screwed by dice? No! I did not get screwed by dice. Not at all. Don't get me wrong, the dice rolls sucked, but the dice rolls are what they are. I did not get screwed by dice. What I did is I rolled the charge from my beast snaggers into the repulsor first. I didn't need to kill the repulsor. I needed to kill the unit of aggressors with the apothecary biologus and the fire discipline. So what I should have done is I should have rolled the first charge with the first unit of knobs. If I failed it, I should have spent a CP to re-roll it. And then if I failed that, I should have then rolled with the other unit of knobs. Because you're not going to roll double ones 3 times in a row. I've done it twice in a row a couple times in my life, but I've never done it 3 times in a row. And that was my mistake. So what happened is I screwed that up. So there you have it. Now, Heraclitus? Oh my gosh. I can't even do that name. Holy crap. Out of every 100 men, 10 shouldn't even be there. 80 are just targets. 9 are the real fighters. And we are lucky to have them, for they make the battle. But the one is a warrior, and he will bring the others back. What this means to me is your units enable each other. It is okay to have Kroot Hounds that don't do anything other than die. It's beautiful to have Kroot Hounds that do nothing but die. Those bad boys run up there and they score you a bunch of points, and they do an amazing job for you. Holy moly, look at the super chat from Mr. Mass Brofect. What a beautiful man. You keep it up, brother. Appreciate all your help with that tryhard team for me and all the matchup advice. Joe, you are an incredible man. You're like my biggest supporter. I so appreciate you. I cannot tell you how much this means to me. You are a freaking rock star, and I'm so excited to watch you grow as a player. It's freaking awesome. It's so cool. And yeah, so your units always have to enable each other. Oh my gosh, and there comes Ian with the super chat, trying to catch up. He giving the wah. He's looking for the orcs to win. My man, that's going into the beer closet for me right there. I freaking love you too, buddy. So, what this means is your units have to enable each other. Your Kroot Hounds, they cost your 40 points, but guess what? Those 40 points can score all of your points in the game. When I play with my Custodes, I take a unit of 4 Witch Seekers. It costs me 50 points, but you know what they do? In turn 1, they scout up, they get me Area Denial, they get me Cleanse. That 50-point unit is going to score me, what is that? 8 victory points by themselves? Here's the math on value out of units, okay? Let's just break this down real quick. Follow me here. This is the math. All right. It's a 2,000 points in your army, and you have to score 100 victory points. Well, you get 10 for having them painted. So you have 2,000 points of your army available to score you 90 victory points. When we break that down, it's going to be approximately every 100 points of your army needs to score you 4.3 victory points to be worth their value. If I have a 50-point unit that gets to go and get me Area Denial and get me Cleanse, and by the way, it's also getting ready to Overwatch and it's also move blocking for me, that's freaking incredible. Holy crap, is that a valuable unit. Its job is just to die, but it basically gets me all the points, and it enables the rest of my units to live. Because when I do that, now I don't have to send up a block of Custodes to do those things. So what happens is these units have synergies, and it's really, really important. Colin Powell says, perpetual optimism is a force multiplier. Yes, that's true. Too many people get way too negative. They think the game is over before the game even started because, I'm playing a better player than me, or, I'm playing an army that is broken. And yes, even though this is the most balanced the game has ever been, there are broken armies in the game right now. But you know what? You need to be optimistic and you need to be ready to play because every single player in the game will always make mistakes. I have never played a player who didn't make a mistake. Everyone will make a mistake. And when mistakes happen, chaos ensues. Sun Tzu tells us opportunity is born. So pay attention, stay optimistic in your games. I think I got 2 more and then we're going to break it down here. Never interrupt the enemy when he's making a mistake. This is from the immortal Napoleon Bonaparte. Dude, this is so true. This might be a little bit spicy, and this is something that we might have to debate a little bit when it comes to like courtesy when you're playing against your opponents. I tend to always punish my opponents when they make bad decisions, but I never punish my opponent if they're making a knowledge error. Like, let's say, for example, they did not realize that I had a reactive move. I'm going to tell them I have a reactive move and let them change their gameplay. But if they're moving into a position that is going to offer me a really nice charge, well, I'm not going to interrupt that because that's not something that they don't have knowledge of. They know that my units can move and make charges, right? So if they're just positioning poorly, I'm going to let them position poorly, and I'm not going to say anything to them. So I'm not going to interrupt that. I will interrupt if they're doing it because there's something that they don't have the knowledge of what my army is capable of, right? So if they're moving to screen out, but they forget that I have a 3-inch deep strike, I'm going to remind them that I have a 3-inch deep strike available to them. And they're like, oh, crap, so I have to screen the 3-inch. I'm like, yes. They're like, okay, cool. So I definitely will always interrupt people, and I won't let them make a error of knowledge, but I will let them make errors of decision-making. Take time to deliberate, but when the time for action comes, stop thinking and go in. If you watch me play, a lot of times I will take 10, 15, 20 minutes in deployment. But my movement phases tend to be about a minute and a half. My movement phases are lightning fast, but my deployment phase is meticulous and it takes a lot of time. But the rest of my gameplay goes boom, 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 boom. So because I set my game plan in my deployment zone, in my deployment phase, that's what I set. Then I basically follow my game plan unless something crazy happens. So you don't have to overthink everything once you get your actual game plan set. Another Colin Powell quote here. There are no secrets to success. It's the result of preparation, hard work, and learning from failure. This is 100% true. So what you guys are all doing watching this right now is you're preparing. You're getting yourself set. You're listening to some of the things that I'm saying. You're listening to the stories I'm telling. You're learning from these great military minds. This is preparation. Hard work, yes. You know what? People might my wife makes fun of me all the time when I come home from a tournament and I'm exhausted. This game is hard work. Think about like the amount of time that we put into learning this game. It's freaking hard work. And yes, it's a blast. We love it. I have a ton of fun with it, but it's absolutely hard work. And then lastly, you have to learn from failure. Dude, I have lost a lot of games. I lost a game this morning that I shouldn't have lost. But you know what? It's okay. I learned from it. I learned some mistakes that I made. So that's all there is to it. Jim Gerlach. Now this one might get a little political, but I'm going to keep it toned down unless someone gives me some spicy messages. Since the events of September 11th, we've rightfully changed our military strategy, so we're now taking the fight to those individuals who aim to do us harm, rather than waiting for another atrocious attack to happen. Well, putting politics aside, this basically just goes back into that same example of the Imperial Guard I was talking about. You know they're shooting you, you know they're going to blast you, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Take it to them. Box them in. Punish them for their strategy of sitting back and doing nothing. There you go. James Keller. In one of the decisive battles of World War I, disastrous reports poured into the headquarters of Marshal Foch, the commander of the Allied forces. The great general never lost heart. When things were at their worst, he drafted his famous order, which is now in all textbooks of military strategy. My center is giving way. My right is pushed back. My left is wavering. The situation is excellent. I shall attack. Well, sometimes things look like you're screwed, and your only hope is to go for the throat. And you know what? That's the time to go for the throat. And that's what Mr. Keller's talking to us about here. This is the last page I've got for us, guys, and then we're going to call it quits for the evening. If you guys have some questions for me, I'm super happy to hang out for a little bit longer. So if you have questions, go and start typing them in chat, and I'll go through them after I finish these two quotes here. A good plan, violently executed, is better than a perfect plan next week. I cannot tell you how freaking true this is. People get so paralyzed in this game. They will. I watched a friend of mine. I think it was yesterday. He was playing a game. I was watching him, and he had a movement phase where he had like 3 units to move, and like he had no choices. It was I forget the armies it was. It was custodians into something, but he had 3 units left, and he drew a tempting target, so he knew which objective he had to go to, and then it was supply drop, so he knew the other objective he had to go to. He's like, okay, cool. So his entire movement phase could have taken 13 seconds where he moved one blob, moved the next blob, and moved the other one in position. But instead, he took about 13 minutes just measuring lines, asking questions. Do not get paralyzed by your analysis. When you know what you need to do, just do it. Make sure you take a few seconds afterwards to make sure that you didn't give up like bad firing lines, but just do it. So many people clock out in this game or they get stressed by the clock. It's because you waste a lot of freaking time. Don't waste time. Once you know what you need to do, go do it. Pause for just a moment. Make sure you're not giving up anything stupid, and then carry on in life. And then lastly, do more than is required of you. Units can do multiple things. I talk about this with the Eversor every single time someone asks me about the Eversor because they think the Eversor is nowhere near as good as the Calidus. They're all wrong. The Eversor is incredible. Units can do multiple things. This is a 75-point unit that gets to go out, get me 5 points on a tempting target. It can sit there and be a lone op and score me sites of power. It can advance and charge and go slaughter something turn 1. It's a 75-point unit that moves 9 that can advance and charge that I can send out to go kill a stupid 50-point unit that I don't have the points for elsewhere in my army to do. Units can have multiple roles, and that's so valuable. That's one of the reasons why I love Mazrog so much. Mazrog is a tank. He holds objectives. And that nerd, you have to respect his killing power because sometimes he just spikes and runs in and deals 20 devastating wounds to a tank. So that's the way it goes. Cool. Let's go through some of these things real fast. Okay, so these are the quotes I have. I'm just going to kind of read through chat. If you guys have any other questions, make sure you type them down. Paralysis by analysis, aka Cooper syndrome. Mr. Jurgen Wergen. He's got a super chat. Oh, and his first super chat, man. Thanks so much. I really appreciate that. It's super sweet of you. He's got a question for me. He says, how long did you do MMA and Muay Thai? Well, sir, I fought mixed martial arts from the age of 18 to 25, and Muay Thai approximately the same. Max Van Horen, question in list building and deciding reserve. Oh, and I should also mention that I've done jiu-jitsu for the last 10 years. I haven't really practiced hard for the last year, but I'm looking to, because I've been really into strength building recently. And I did CrossFit very, very intensely for about 5 years. But I injured my leg, so I had to kind of stop that. Max Van Horen, he's got a question. In list building and deciding reserves, how important is it to take into account the number of units you can out-deploy your opponent? I think it's pretty, it depends on the army, right? So I would say that if you're playing Sisters and you have 18 drops, you have a huge advantage in deployment. But if you're playing Custodes, there's no way you're going to get an advantage in deployment, so it doesn't matter to have more units, right? So it really depends on the army. Like, I would just say that is a strength that your army could have. So if your army just naturally has a bunch of drops, that's a big strength. And if your army doesn't have a lot of drops, it's not a big strength. But I wouldn't say that you would want to plan that in your deployment all that much, if that makes sense. Then I was 101 modules at a GT last weekend. If I didn't rush, I would have timed out so easily. It's like having 2 deployments. 101 module. I'm sorry, buddy. I'm not sure I understand. Oh, you were just pressed for time. I see how it is. Yeah. Gotcha. Max Van Horen's got another question. I love the questions, buddy. You talk a lot about how important deployment is. Are we going to get some more videos about the tips and tricks of deployment? A lot of that is like workshops, if you know what I mean. So I do a lot of deployment with a lot of my coaching clients because I find it's one of the most important things. The basics of deployment, I think I actually covered really, really well in my video where I talked about deployment. Where I think the thumbnail was "I solved deployment for you." It was, or in the title of it was maybe "How to Deploy in Warhammer 40,000." There might be a little bit more else I could do in it, but a lot of that is just workshop, to be honest with you. There's a ton of stuff to talk about, but it can be so individualized to your army that most of the time, I either answer that on a question by question basis in the members only side of the Discord. I know I just jump into video with people fairly often on that. Oh, 101 models. Yeah, that would make more sense. But then I also go through that with my coaching clients a lot as well. BJJ cuddle at the WTC. Bro, are we going to roll at the WTC? Dude, all right, maybe we roll at the WTC. That'd be freaking awesome. Yeah, okay, 101 models at a GT last weekend. If you didn't rush, you wouldn't have time. All right, that makes a lot more sense. All right, cool. So sorry, buddy. I probably should have realized that. Thanks for pointing that out, Inga. Yeah, I don't know, man. I've never had issues with it, but I understand some people do. Generally speaking, a lot of times with your big blobs, the best thing to do is to measure the furthest away model and measure the closest model, put them down, and then you can basically just place the rest of the models in between. But if you're playing something like Orcs where everything's going to be mounted anyway, you're just moving trucks. Like the amount of times you actually move infantry blobs are generally not that much. You generally move most infantry blobs once or twice maximum, because the rest of the time they're just going to move in transports. Um, cool. And I think I just set a date with Todaface, and we're gonna be rolling BJJ. Should we film it? Should we film a BJJ match and put it on YouTube? That'd be pretty hilarious. Someone tag Major Kill. I want to roll with Major Kill. That dude's awesome. I'd love to roll with him as well. Cool. All right, guys. Well, this was that. I think this was actually a really, really good stream. Seriously, what I want you to do is I want you to go pick up the Book of Five Rings. Go pick up the Art of War. Go pick up some like Dwight Eisenhower's biography. Guys, these men have written some really incredible things down in these books that honestly, this stuff makes you better at 40k, and I think it makes you a better man in general to kind of understand these things. Um, so yeah, that's what I got for you tonight. Um, you guys, I'd love to see everyone in the TTS tournament. If you're not a member of the Discord, you can sign up by becoming a YouTube member, or you can sign up on Ko-Fi down below. The link is in the description. You'll just link your either YouTube or Ko-Fi to Discord under settings, and then you'll have access to all of our members-only channels. And then you'll be able to access the TTS tournament. It's going to be really awesome. The amount of skill level increase that I saw everyone make last time, they just jumped leaps and bounds from where they were. We're going to see it again this round, so it's going to be really, really awesome. So I just want to say thanks so much for everyone's attention. You guys are all rock stars. And until next time, I hope everybody enjoys a beautiful crumping. Bye-bye.